This week, we're going to be talking about adding and subtracting mixed numbers. Last week, we talked about, I gave you some fraction tips. I talked about just adding basic fractions, subtracting fractions. You need to review that, make sure you have that solid in your brain, because that's a foundation for this. Last week, it looked, let me show you. What we did last week looked like this. 2/3 plus 1/8, 4/5, take away 1/3. We had to find a common denominator and then do that function. So as I'm bringing this to mind right now, if you're not solid on that, you need to go back and review that. It's foundational. So that's what we did last week. Okay? This week we're going to look at mixed numbers. Mixed numbers are when you have a whole number and a fraction. To me that makes sense. They're mixed together. A whole mixed with a fraction. We showed last week for just a minute an improper fraction where the numerator was bigger than the denominator. The numerator larger than the denominator, and I said it is improper for the numerator to be bigger. Now that can be changed, and that can become a mixed number. So that's how they kind of, improper becomes a mixed number, or a mixed number can become an improper fraction. So as we do this, I'm going to take my time. You need to have a notebook out, maybe take some notes, pause this, make sure you understand it. You may need to view this a couple of times. So I just want you to, this is going to be another foundational piece. Before we start this, I want to remind you of something very basic. And you're going to think, Miss Weaver, I know that, and it's okay. I want to remind you that when you're doing a simple addition problem, you begin and work it right to left. So the first thing we do on here is we add 2 plus 5, and then 5 plus 3, and then 1 plus nothing. That's how we always work. We start way over on the right-hand side and work over. And the same thing is true when we subtract. We start way over here on the right-hand side, we subtract, and then we work that way. Kind of the opposite of the way we read. That's very important because that's the same thing is true when we are doing mixed numbers. We're going to start way over on the right-hand side. So we're going to look at this problem for 1 4/5 plus 2 1/10. Now I hope that you are brilliantly thinking already, I need a common denominator. Because when you add, subtract, or compare fractions, you must have a common denominator. So before we do anything else, we're going to get that common denominator. To get that, I think of the least common multiple, and again, you can make that list and start thinking of those in your brain. And I know that the least common multiple here between 5 and 10 is 10. So for 2 1/10, I don't have to change it. 2 1/10 is going to be the same. I'm going to change this to 1 and some kind of 10. So 5 times 2 gives me a 10th. So I have to do the same thing to the fourth. 4 times 2, and that's 8 tenths. So now I will add those up, and I'm going to add starting on the right. So I'm going to add the fraction first. I'm going to have 8 tenths and 1/10, and I'm going to get 9 tenths. And then I'll move over to the left, and 1 plus 2 is 3. Can 9 tenths be simplified? Do they have a factor common to them that I can simplify it? No. So this is my final answer. There is no need to simplify. So I have found my my least common multiple, a common denominator, and I have solved that one. We do the very same thing when we're subtracting a mixed number. Again, first thing, I must have a common denominator. So I'm going to look over here, and I'm going to think for just a minute. And you may want to make a list. If you need to make a list, go ahead. Let's make a list of the multiples. And again, I told you last week, I like to start with a large number because sometimes I can see that smaller number multiple as I'm listing them. So I'm going to start with the multiples of 6. 6, 12, 18. I already see my multiple. But I'm going to list them for us. 4, 8, 12. So, my least common multiple, my new common denominator, is going to be 12. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to have 4 and some kind of 12 and 2 and some kind of 12. So, 4 times what? 4 times 3. 3. So remember that balancing act. If I do it here, I have to do it here. 4 times 3 is 12. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, I've got my new fraction here, so let's move up to the top number. 6 times 2 gives me 12, so I must do it to the top. 5 times 2 equals 10. So now, I have my common denominator. I'm ready to subtract. I start on the far right and work back to the left. Start with my fraction. 10 12, take away 9 12. And you know what? Maybe I should show you this on the pie again, because remember my denominators can stay the same. If I have a piece of pie with 12 pieces, if I can do that, 1, 2, I'm not going to do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if I have 10 pieces, these are the 10 pieces, and I take away 9 of them, I have 1 piece left. So we'll do 10 take